I have not been this excited to make a dish in a very long time. Welcome back to Bourdain.
Everybody should know how to use a knife.
Use everything, waste nothing.
Let's start at the beginning.
It ain't that hard, okay?
Hope you're doing well. My name is Mitch May. We're learning how to cook with Anthony Bourdain's Layout Cookbook. If you are new, welcome. Thank you for clicking on my goofy face. If you have been here with me for a while, let's do this thing. We're going to make cassoulet. If you are not familiar, which not many people are, surprisingly. You would think in New Jersey people would know more about a French regional dish. It is a slow cooked stew consisting of beans, duck confit, pork belly, and herbs, and I can keep going on, but I'm getting freaking hungry. I have Bourdain's book linked down below in the description of this video as usual, if you'd like to grab it. If not, just follow along. This is going to take some time. Let's get moving. So we have a lot to do, but it's a very chill, almost therapeutic process in which we're going to begin making duck confit. It's much easier than it sounds. Personally, when I hear French words, I start shaking in my boots, but we're going to salt heavily 4 duck legs, put these in a shallow container and cover them with plastic wrap to hang out in the fridge overnight. After 24 hours, we whip these babies out and you can see through the lovely process of osmosis, we have a puddle of duck juice. That is because the salt extracted the moisture and at the same time seasoned and penetrated the duck meat itself. We give these a quick pat down to remove any excess moisture and season heavily once again with some fresh cracked black pepper. These go back into our shallow oven-proof dish. The goal being to lay these flat because we are going to cover these entirely, ideally, with melted rendered duck fat. I did not dive deep enough into the International Bank of Mitchell's, so I had to substitute a little bit of avocado oil just to ensure the legs get fully covered. We now add our aromatics. Bourdain calls for 1 garlic clove. I opted for 2, and I actually doubled our other aromatics, being 8 sprigs of fresh thyme and 2 sprigs of fresh rosemary, getting everything nice and incorporated. We now cover this tightly with aluminum foil, ensuring there's a nice seal, and throw this in the oven for about an hour at 375 degrees. While this is vibing out, filling my house with a lovely aroma, we're gonna whip out our beans, all right? A whole lot of beans. A lot of beans.
Can I say something?
Where is he? Beans! How did you get in here?
1,100 grams to be exact. Bourdain calls for Tarbais beans, which are from France. Cannellini beans and other white northern beans will do the same trick. These go into a large pot and then we cover with at least 2 to 3 inches of water because these are going to expand overnight. Coming back to our duck, it has finished cooking, taking about an hour and a half for me, and it is marvelous. Now, a sign that we've cooked this properly is when the bone separates from the meat, as you can see here. I found it interesting. This method of cooking was initially used to preserve the meat because it can last for a very long time. Once that fat cools down and we store it in our fridge, I don't know what that noise was, we can store it for upwards of 6 months. However, it is not going to last us nearly that long. We're going to use this tomorrow. The following day, we strain and rinse our beans. Apparently, you can never have too big of a strainer. These are going to go into a very large pot. In this large pot, we are going to make a magical slow cooking mixture. Adding 1 onion quartered, a 1/4 pound of pork rind. Add a bouquet garni, which is parsley, thyme, and bay leaf wrapped up together in some leek leaves. Cover everything with some filtered water, allowing the anticipation to nearly kill me, followed up with salt and pepper to taste. Something that always gives me an issue because I never want to over season, so I go about a tablespoon of salt and half a tablespoon of pepper. If you thought we're finished here, so did I. It turns out we need 2 pounds of fresh pork belly as well, getting everything nice and incorporated. Bring this up to a boil and then simmer down for about an hour until these beans are nice and tender. One thing I found interesting, Bourdain doesn't have us skim the scum as we usually do with many recipes. I think this speaks to the roots of the dish. You know, it's an old-timey country stew. There was no French laundry at the time. They weren't worried about purity or clarity in stock. I think if anything, this scum adds some flavor and nutritional value. But with my tangent aside, let's whip out these duck legs, which have been chilling in the fridge for about 12 hours. Bourdain gives us the 2 options to either heat up the whole container, thus melting the duck fat, or fish them out how your friend is doing right now. It is a pretty messy process. I would definitely wear gloves unless you're trying to moisturize with a lovely duck garlic thyme infused lotion. But after separating our legs from the oil, we are now going to melt down this oil once again because we're going to use it later in the cooking process. We should have salvaged about 2 cups worth. I found I only only got about a cup. While the stew and oil are doing their thing, a fun little touch Bourdain has us do is pull out the thigh bone. We just hold the drumstick with one hand, and twisting and pulling and yanking, the thigh bone comes out pretty easily, with it bringing a nice little chunk of meat to taste test, of course. This was oddly very satisfying to do. I don't know why, but if you gave me an hour with just duck legs to pull the freaking thigh bones out of, I'd be a happy dude. Giving this a taste, this was probably one of the best things I've put in my mouth. Use that, clip that, edit that phrase however you want, because this was that good. It was tender, it was well seasoned, and it still had some nice background notes from the herbs we added. And these legs are just a component in our dish, which I find amazing. With that aside, we get the melted duck fat and strain it through a little sieve, and it leaves us with about, how I said, 1 cup. Next up, we're left with 3/4 pounds of pork rind, or pig skin, which is very strange for me to touch. The goal I'm trying to achieve is slicing this thinly so it can act as a sort of pie crust. I know pig skin and pie crust don't really go together, but it's going to make sense when we begin to assemble this entire cassoulet. I don't get too particular here. I probably go for about a 1/4 inch thickness using the sharpest blade I have. And by the time we're done all of this, we can come back to our bean mixture, which has finished cooking and the beans are nice and tender. We're going to let this cool for 20 minutes and then pull everything out of the mixture minus the beans, the pork rind, the bouquet garni, the onions, and the pork belly as well. Let that mixture hang out because we are going to strain it in a little bit, but first let's slice up our pork rind into cute little cubes. I don't get too particular here, probably about 1/2 inch cubes to 1 inch, and we take our pork belly and slice this up into about 2 inch cubes. If you haven't noticed already, this recipe takes some time, but it's a pretty chill process. It's not very stressful at all, and what we're doing is nothing complex. Our remaining bouquet garni and onions are going to get tossed, and we are going to now strain our beans from that lovely liquid they left behind. Save this liquid. We're not going to toss this liquid out. Coming to the finish line here, we are now going to brown up some sausages in that duck fat we saved. Bourdain calls for us to use all that fat we saved. I figure we just go with like 1 tablespoon to 2 tablespoons. I don't want to deep fry these sausages. The recipe calls for 6 pork sausages. I kind of just chopped and mixed and matched here, starting off at a low heat first, slowly bringing up the heat so these don't explode as they get a nice caramelization. I know it's not literally a caramelization, but that's what I say anyway because it looks brown. Once we're happy with how these have browned up, we're going to add our pork rind that we cubed up back into the pan along with 3 onions thinly sliced. We're going to cook this mixture for about 4 to 5 minutes until we get a nice little color to our onions, and then I add our garlic. This is about 2 cloves thinly sliced as opposed to the one Bourdain calls for. And don't tell anyone, but I'm learning that a little white wine does wonders at the end of cooking caramelized onions. This is probably 15 to 20 minutes in. Our onions have a nice color and glaze to them. Now we begin to blend everything up. I don't know how essential this is, especially if you're going for a more rustic vibe. You probably don't have to do this step, but Bourdain says jump, I say when and how freaking high. We're just trying to get to a nice puree vibe. I couldn't get there because I didn't add enough duck fat, which would have loosened things up. So instead, I added a little white wine, probably about 1 tablespoon or 2, and make it easier for my blender. Once we get to this phase, it is just magical. I could watch that for longer than I would rather admit. And now, my friend, after about 2 days, it is time to assemble our cassoulet. We have our broth, we have our pork rind, duck confit, our pork belly chopped up into cubes, our puree mixture, our sausage browned lovely, and our beans all ready to go in. So let's begin. We start with our pork rind thinly sliced, going on the bottom of our deep dish Dutch oven, sort of acting like a pie crust, as you can see here. Follow this up with some beans, creating a nice layer. Hit it with some dabs of our onion puree mixture. We then slice up our sausages, or you could put them in whole, I assume, and layer them on top of everything, creating a nice little layer of treats for the people diving in here. Cover this up with another layer of beans, more of our puree mixture, and now we use our pork belly. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to layer this meat. I think however you want to do it is perfectly fine. Just make sure you're following up every layer with beans and more of this onion puree mixture. This was hands down my favorite part of the process process, just layering these lovely flavors we developed over the course of 2 days into something delicious. Now, we definitely saved the best for last, adding our duck confit on top of everything, followed by another little layer of beans, just because that's what I had remaining. Dab things up with what's remaining of our onion puree mixture, and now we're going to top everything with the juice we reserved from the beans cooking. The goal here is to add enough liquid so our cassoulet is covered, but not swimming. Bourdain actually has us reserve 1 cup because he has us cook this cassoulet twice on 2 separate days. I am not going to do that. I'm cooking it once and eating it the same day. This is now going to go in an oven at 350 degrees for 1 hour. Now, a trick I saw from Eric Repair and a few other people is to break the quote crust we have forming here. This will allow more of the mixture to reduce and create a thicker crust at the top of this cassoulet. An hour later, knocking down our oven to 300 degrees, don't mind those creme brulees, this cassoulet is going to cook for an additional 2 hours. I'm still continuing to break this crust every half hour, and when I'm happy with how it looks, Victor valiantly rips this out of the oven, and this is what we are left with. We've developed a really nice crust. The house smells amazing. Let's dive into this thing. At the risk of waxing too poetic, this really is like a Christmas present. You're getting hit with all these different aromas. There's little treats here and there, and of course, you have the lovely duck confit waiting for you sitting at the top. I'm lucky to have some cool French-made plates my mom got me for Christmas, and let's dive in and give this a taste. In my opinion, this is one of those dishes that defines comfort food. Everything is so unctuous, everything is so freaking delicious together, and it just cooked over a long period of time. Easily one of the top 3 things I've made in this entire cookbook, and something I'd be more than happy to make for a bunch of people. It's cliche, you know, but I do believe this dish conveys very well the love, the time, the effort you spent to make something that at the end of the day is going to nurture a whole lot of people. And not to mention, I did make this dish during the middle of winter. It was snowing outside, you just get done shoveling, and then you have this waiting for you. It's something pretty magical. With that, another recipe is down. If you'd like to check out how those creme brulees turned out, I'll have them to your right. Thank you for spending your time with me. This was Back to Bourdain.
Stay organized and clean up after yourself. You do the best you can.